So let's first talk about the explicit memory system. This is what we normally refer to as everyday memory. It's verbal and it's conscious. We can think about something that's happened to us and recall many of the details, and we can sequence the experience. Another quality or attribute of explicit memory system is that it organizes our past experiences. It helps us to recreate a personal history of ourselves. It has a timeline. We can, sequence different aspects of whatever that experience was. And then the last thing I'll say about explicit memory system is that it begins to develop around 18 months. And it's an essential part of the brain that comes online in about 18 months and fully matures at around 5 years of age. But that hippocampus is an essential piece of helping us to sequence information and to remember things. So whenever we're telling somebody a story, we're accessing our explicit memory system. If I'm sharing a time at Christmas time when I was young, or a camping trip I went on, or a fishing trip I went on, these are examples of the explicit memory system.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about explicit memory system. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include verbal and conscious memory, everyday memory, past experiences, and personal history of ourselves. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as essential part of the brain, telling somebody a story, sequence information, Christmas time, camping trip, and fishing trip. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial and interesting information about explicit memory system in this lecture.
Every summer, my family and I travel across the world, 3,000 miles away, to the culturally diverse country of India. Now, India is a country infamous for its scorching heat and humidity. For me, the only relief from this heat is to drink plenty of water. Now, while in India, my parents always remind me to only drink boiled or bottled water. Because unlike here in America, where I can just turn on a tap and easily get clean, potable water, in India the water is often contaminated. So my parents have to make sure that the water we drink is safe. However, I soon realized that not everyone is fortunate enough to enjoy the clean water we did. Outside my grandparents' house in the busy streets of India, I saw people standing in long lines under the hot sun, filling buckets with water from a tap. I even saw children who looked the same age as me, filling up these clear plastic bottles with dirty water from streams on the roadside. This unacceptable social injustice compelled me to want to find a solution to our world's clean water problem.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about drinking water in India. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include culturally diverse country of India, scorching heat, humidity, boiled or bottled water, and clean potable water. In addition, she also discussed various other aspects such as contaminated water, grandparents' house, busy streets of India, long lines, hot sun, clear plastic bottles, dirty water, and social injustice. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial information about drinking water in this lecture.
There's a lot of interest in what forms those clouds. Why are those clouds there? Why do they stick around? At the center of every cloud drop is a particle. You can't grow a cloud drop without having a particle there for the water to condense on. The key questions that people have not directly addressed until very recently is what actually forms those clouds. And so the ones that you're looking at over the ocean, it turns out sea salt is a very effective nucleator for forming clouds. So there's a really good chance that those are loaded with sea salt. But as you go inland, you start to have pollution come from all different kinds of sources. And so different sources form clouds more effectively than others. And we're trying to unravel which sources are actually contributing to the clouds. The clouds are incredibly important players in climate change, in that they reflect the light back to space. And so they're keeping things much, much cooler than they would be if they weren't there. They also play a huge role in regional weather, where having more pollution input into the clouds is affecting weather patterns. And in particular, it's actually reducing the amount of precipitation. So we're starting to see drought in areas with super high levels of air pollution.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about what forms clouds. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics, which include center of every cloud drop, particle, sea salt, different kinds of sources, important players, and climate change. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects, such as reflect the light back to space, regional weather, weather patterns, the amount of precipitation, drought, and air pollution. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial information about cloud formation in this lecture.
A language dies when the last person who speaks it dies. But you know, sometimes people say it dies when the second last person who speaks it dies, because then the last person has nobody to talk to. Well, of course, languages have come and gone throughout history as communities have come and gone. Well, there are about 6,000 languages in the world at the moment, more or less. Nobody knows the exact number. And of these, people think that about half of them are so seriously endangered that they're likely to die out in the course of the present century. Now, the present century is 100 years, half is 3,000 languages, so that means one language is dying out somewhere in the world, on average, every 2 weeks. There are all kinds of reasons why languages die. One is the physical reasons, when people are affected by famine and disease and earthquake. Another is genocide, when some countries deliberately try and stamp out a small language. But the main reason is globalization. That is, there are some huge languages in the world like English and Arabic and Spanish and French, and these are like steamrollers, crushing the smaller languages that they find in their path.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about dying languages. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include second-last person, communities, 6,000 languages in the world, seriously endangered languages, and course of the present century. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as physical reasons, famine, disease, earthquake, genocide, globalization, English, Arabic, Spanish, and French. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial information about languages in the world.
This simulation shows what you might see if you were orbiting a black hole. The light and position of background stars around the hole are distorted by its gravity, and they seem to spin around. On the right, the constellation Orion appears to approach the event horizon, the boundary from which nothing can escape. Orion's stars look like they become separated and get spun around. Once the hole has passed by, Orion reappears on the left and looks normal again. Users can also experiment with different scenarios. This is what you might see if you were travelling towards a black hole, with rocket engines slowing your descent. Another simulation mimics freefall into a hole. In the middle, the light of the entire universe appears to be concentrated in a bright ring.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about black holes. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics, which include position of background stars, gravity, constellation Orion, and event horizon. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as different scenarios, traveling towards a black hole, rocket engine, simulation, light of the entire universe, and a bright ring. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial and interesting information about black holes in this lecture.
I marvelled at how often powerful feel powerless. But in the face of this sense of disempowerment, there's no decline in involvement in organisations which seek to share wealth and opportunities, which seek to protect one another's rights and work towards the common good. According to the UN, civil society groups have grown 40-fold since the turn of the last century. Last century. Internationally, the non-profit sector is worth $1 trillion. There are 700,000 not-for-profit organisations in Australia alone. 700,000. The UN recognises 37,000 specifically civil society organisations across the globe working in international relief and gives accreditation to many of them. This profound movement towards harnessing voices and resources from outside the realm of governments and officialdom reflects a growth in trust. The third sector, NGOs. Putnam, who discovered in the field of local government in Italy, the best predictor of governmental success was the strength and density of a region's civic associations.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about NGOs and the civil society groups. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include wealth and opportunities, UN, the turn of the last century, the non-profit sector, and Australia. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as civil society organisations, international relief, the realm of governments, trust, the third sector, local government in Italy, and strength and density of civic associations. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial and interesting information in this lecture.
Every aspect of the business is changing. What is healthy food is changing. What do people want to eat and drink is changing. How should products be labeled has not been defined. There's no authority that defines it. Supply chains are globalizing, yet traceability and safety standards have not been established. There's an NGO in every corner. So there's somebody there calling us out when we don't do things right, but then there's no standard to look at in terms of what we need to do right. The retail environment is changing, whether it's the emergence of Walmart in the 90s and the year 2000s, or now the hard discounters and the emergence of e-commerce. Everything about the world is changing. And then, right here in Silicon Valley, all of the best and brightest that we want in our companies are being recruited by these startups. So we have a tough time recruiting the right talent to run our companies. I'm speaking to all of you. So I think what happens is that we are facing unprecedented change in our business models. And on top of that, we have to globalize, but the world is a tough place right now. We've got economic volatility, macroeconomic crises in many, many places, political upheaval. So I think companies like ours, if you really want to keep performing, you've almost got to change your model all the time.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about changing business model in the world. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include healthy food, what people eat and drink, supply chains, safety standards, NGO in every corner, and the retail environment. In addition, she also discussed various other aspects such as the emergence of Walmart, emergence of e-commerce, Silicon Valley, companies, startups, right talent, economic volatility, and macroeconomic crisis. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial information about changing world in this lecture.
I have said before that you can't have a civilization that doesn't have art. When we think about the great civilizations historically, all of them had great production of culture and art, because a society has to be able to observe itself. And the sophistication of the great civilizations were their ability to look at themselves. And what allows a society to do that are the producers of art and culture. It would mirror back to the core of the society exactly what is being produced at that moment, how people are thinking of themselves, and how individuals are relating to the social structure at that time. Art is the vehicle through which we understand that. Were you to take away art, what would be that mirror? How would we see what we are about? How would we understand what was going on in Paris at the time of the Impressionists, when people were learning to see in a completely different way? Cinematography, all of these things are just emerging, and here are people looking at the world in a very different way, which was considered so radical at the time.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about art and civilization. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include great civilizations historically, production of culture and art, society observe itself, and sophistication of the great civilizations. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as people, individuals, the social structure, Paris, cinematographer, and radical world. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial and interesting information about art and civilization in this lecture.
A car park is a business like any other, and it pays to invest in a marketing plan. This is particularly true if the car park you own is not visible from the main roads. It might be, for example, hidden behind buildings, and a permanent visible sign to tell people where they can park is essential. If possible, advertise special features of your car park, such as competitive rates, on that sign. There are other opportunities to work with local businesses to co-brand, too. You might offer coupons in a local magazine, or work with hotels and airlines or mobile car washes to offer special deals to guests at the hotel or passengers on the airline. One good way to get customers to select your car park over rivals and make a profit is to check ahead for special events. You can offer shuttle services from your car park to the event, provided that you plan well in advance. Like any business, the financial health of a car park requires a strong marketing plan.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about car park business. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include strong marketing plan, hidden behind buildings, a permanent visible sign, special features, competitive rates, and local businesses. In addition, she also discussed various other aspects such as coupons, local magazine, hotels and airlines, mobile car washes, special deals for guests, passengers, special events, shuttle services, and financial health. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial information about car park business.
I don't know why that was taught in medical school, but it was considered to be a fat-soluble vitamin and therefore stored in the body, and it would act for a long period of time and it would build up and you get into trouble. But now, in recent years, when we've had the technology to measure fat content of vitamin D, we find there's not much there. And the reason there's not much there is there's not much coming into the diet, or we are avoiding sun. So we have less vitamin D, and therefore our fat tissue does too. It's not stored up there in high concentrations. You don't begin to store vitamin D in fat until you begin to build it up in the serum, and that doesn't occur until you already have relatively high 25-hydroxy-D values. Now, it's at this point you begin to accumulate fat. If you were out here, you'd probably have a very healthy fat concentration of D, but not very many people are out there. These are studies that were done under controlled circumstances where we could control how much was coming in and what the concentrations were under the circumstances. But the one thing students seem to recall is that fat-soluble vitamins can produce intoxication, therefore you have to be careful.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about vitamin D. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include medical school, fat-soluble vitamin, stored in the body, technology, fat content of vitamin D, diet, and avoiding sun. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as fat tissues, high concentration of vitamin D, controlled circumstances, and intoxication. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial and interesting information about vitamin D in this lecture.
Sea creatures are inspiring the latest devices that harness wave power. This one, called the oyster, sits on the ocean floor and opens and closes as waves pass over it. Cables attach it to generators on the shore. Since November 2009, it's been powering 9,000 homes in the Orkney Islands. Another device looks like a snake. The anaconda is made from a rubber tube filled with water that floats just below the surface. When a swell hits the front of it, the tube is squeezed. A bulge ripples down its length and powers a turbine in its tail. Prototypes are currently being tested, but the full-scale version will be 200 meters long. This system also looks like a snake, but this one is made of steel. It floats near the surface, where waves make its joints move. This drives hydraulic systems that power electrical generators. Like the anaconda, it's still being tested. Results will prove if these devices are up to the job of supplying viable sources of green energy.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about sea creatures. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include latest devices, ocean floor, waves, cables, 9,000 homes, snake, anaconda, and rubber tube filled with water. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as turbine, prototype, full-scale version, 200-meter long, steel, hydraulic system, electrical generators, and sources of green energy. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial and interesting information about sea creatures in this lecture.
If you're interested in protecting the biosphere, you ought to get on with that job. You shouldn't be distracted by the equally significant but different agendas of reducing poverty. At the same time, you've got two British social scientists here. Dilys Rowe works for the International Institute for Environment and Development in London, and Joe Elliott actually works for African Wildlife Foundation nowadays. But she's saying here, poor people should not pay the price for biodiversity protection. Well, it's about whether you can achieve a win-win solution, whether you can achieve economic growth which brings wealth in order to cut poverty without damaging biodiversity. And the argument is that if you want to protect biodiversity, you have to focus on that as a goal. But if you do that, you run the risk of hurting the poor, and you also run the risk of inconveniencing or reducing economic growth. And we're used in developed countries, industrialized countries, to seeing this argument, this axis argued about, with, let us say, a government wishing to start drilling for oil in place X, which is full of wildlife, and the wildlife conservation societies urging them not to, on the grounds that it's a wilderness refuge. We're used to that debate. What I'm saying is that in the developing world, there's a third axis, and it's quite a complex one.
In this lecture, the speaker was talking about protecting the biosphere. At the beginning of the lecture, the speaker covered many topics which include significant agenda, reducing poverty, British social scientists, International Institute for Environment, London, and African Wildlife Foundation. In addition, he also discussed various other aspects such as poor people, biodiversity protection, win-win solution, economic growth, developed countries, industrialized countries, wildlife conservation society, and wilderness refuge. In conclusion, the speaker provided very crucial information about biodiversity in this lecture.